Happy New Year and welcome to the first Silmarillion film project of 2022. I am your co-host Dave Kale. I was mysteriously absent from the last podcast of 2021, which kind of a bummer. But I'm back with a renewed resolve here in January of 2022. Not COVID hasn't beaten me down yet.
There we go.
Nor has it beaten down my co-host, Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor, or our special guest, one of our head writers, Marie Prosser. How are you, Marie?
I'm well. Happy New Year.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're great.
We are excited to follow up our last exciting discussion about necromancy and dead elves.
Part 2 of necromancy.
That's it. So we got to figure out what we're doing around the necromancy. Tonight is the day.
And black magic.
That's it. And today's the day when we're finally going to solve the Thuringwethil mystery. We've enjoyed the character of Thuringwethil that we have developed to this point and the role that we've given her in the story. But now we need to give her story its conclusion. And we got to figure that out, which means, of course, we need to look back and make sure that her whole story has a decent arc, because so we need to probably go back to the beginning. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. Quick announcements to begin. A couple things. First, a kind of a big thing, actually, and that is a new thing that we are doing at Signum, at the Mythgard Institute, actually, called Mythgard Miscellany. I wanted to emphasize this because this is of particular relevance, I think, to our film community. Mythgard Miscellany is designed to be a whole separate, it's basically a curated place. We're going to be publishing bunches of stuff. Basically, we want... So we have several different goals here. One goal is that we would love to hear more voices of more people on a wider variety of things. Our Mythgard community is really broad. Of course, so far, most of the Mythgard stuff is like me doing Tolkien stuff, right? Which is fun and all, but there's much more that can be done and a lot more that people would like to talk about. One of the other things that's really motivated us is, over the years, seeing so much really good work that's being done, really cool, interesting stuff that just kind of happens. Like, there's no showcase for it. Like, there's no place to kind of take it and let everybody see it, right? For instance, one obvious example of this is conference presentations, right? How many times over the last 10 years have I seen or listened to an awesome a conference presentation at Myth Mood or one of our regional moods, and I've been sitting there saying, oh man, like, there are so many people who would be fascinated by this, but there's like, the conference happens, it's really cool, everybody involved in the conference enjoys it, and then there's no future. Like, now what happens, right? I mean, there is, of course, the possibility of taking something and maybe developing it into a paper that you could publish in a scholarly journal, but that's not the logical, end goal for a lot of things that get presented at conferences. So anyway, Mythgard, that's just one example. But of course, needless to say, there is a very great deal of creative stuff and awesome things that have happened in connection with the Film project, which I think we would love to see and talk about. Because the idea of Mythgard Miscellany is that it can be genuinely miscellaneous. We're not just talking about publishing papers, though we could do that. We're not only just talking about like a visual, a video presentation, though we can accept those too. Anything. Music, art, as we have in the examples down here. If if we scroll down here, to our community of contributors. A poem, dance, a cake that you baked, whatever, like anything that is like cool and interesting that you think that other people would be interested in, post it. Now, again, this is not going to be like a kind of a space where like anybody can post anything that they want. This is going to be a curated space. So, we're going to be looking through the submissions and we're going to be choosing, to kind of present and publish the ones that we present and publish, which is going to make it, I think, a really, really fun space to watch as well. So right now, this is a brand new initiative of ours. So the main thing is we're really looking for submissions. So we have, and also we have sort of two different kind of levels of submission. There's community contributions, and then there's our experts. We're hoping to bring in, different kinds of experts to sort of chat or publish things on various stuff. We're approaching, movie people and authors and scholars and all kinds of people to come and present something. But as I say, we're also looking for all kinds of things, anything. That folks want to submit. So, as I say, I know there's the film was one of the first things that I thought of when we were talking about this internally and talking about people who are doing really fascinating creative work that's just kind of going out there and then nobody's seeing it, right? I'm like, I know a place where this happens quite a lot. So, and we'll think about that. I don't know if we would necessarily do like script publication this way. We might do that in different ways, but especially I'm thinking, especially a lot of the art and stuff that's been done. There would be a really cool potential, I think, for a lot of that to be done. So, this is the main thing I wanted to bring to everybody's attention here today. Mythgard Miscellany. So just go to mythgard.org, click on Mythgard Miscellany, this menu up on top, and then scroll down. This is the link to the submission form here under Community of Contributors. So. We're going to be talking about the Wheel of Time adaptation, which was fascinating on several levels, both because a Robert Jordan adaptation, holy cow, who saw that coming? I mean, I know we've seen it coming for several years, but like 5 years ago, who saw that coming? And but also, of course, watching Amazon Prime do an epic serial adaptation of a high fantasy novel, I was kind of interested to see how that went. And have to say, kind of loved the Wheel of Time adaptation. Just gonna put that out there. I thought it was fascinating, really well done in a lot of ways. Not perfect, but really well done. Okay, so that's Mythgard Miscellany. Second, briefer, longer in text but briefer in time announcement here is our space program. We have announced our candidate modules for March. So if you would like to learn to write in Tengwar, read Old English, appreciate Chinese science fiction, perform Shakespeare, watch classic Japanese anime, or interpret ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, we have the modules for you. All this and more coming up in March in our space program. So go to signumuniversity.org/space and you can find information on our space program and how that works. So just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of the exciting opportunities. We're in our second month now of running our space modules. The January we started, December was our first set of modules. January is our second set of modules. It's been awesome. The students and the teachers who have been involved in that have just both been having an awesome time. My oldest son is doing the anime module now, so he's graduated, so he's in college now, so he's doing space, and he's loving getting the chance to talk about anime with folks. Anyway, so that's stuff that is happening at Signum. Lots of stuff happening at Signum. All right. Back to the map of Bolero. Let's see. What's the first thing I noticed this time that I didn't notice before? Oh, that's right. Okay, here it is. There's always something. It's literally always something. I never look at this map without noticing a new thing. Today, it's Lanaiwen. I had totally forgotten the name of the body of water in the marshes of Nevrest. There we go. If anyone had asked me what that was, I would have been like, huh? So there it is. Lanaiwen. Would have forgotten that. So we will come back to this in reference if we need to, but we will start off by recalling that our primary theater of action that we are discussing here is Tolsirion up here, right in the pass, and then, of course, up here in Dorthonion with the Baron Hunt as well. That's also going to be relevant, especially as we kind of touched on the question of Sauron's involvement in that and how that's going to happen, but we will see. So let's focus on Thuringwethil. Thuringwethil, as we have depicted her, for those of you who are new or whose memory is as bad as mine about what we've talked about previously, Thuringwethil, we have basically made Sauron's right-hand person, right? There have been, his kind of posse, right? Sauron's inner ring has been Draugluin, the father of werewolves, Tevildo, the Lord of the Evil Cats, and Thuringwethil, the vampire, with Shelob coming in as a contractor on a couple occasions. Shelob and the spiders, though she's not exactly she's not so much of a team player as the others. But for all those things, Thuringwethil has been his most. She's the one that we have depicted as his sort of intellectual equal. Like, she's the one that he schemes and plans with, basically. Not just somebody who is merely a captain of his forces. Like, that's basically Draugluin has been like captain in the field, essentially, for a lot of Sauron's initiatives. And we saw Draugluin leading the anti-cavalry forces in the Dagor Bragalach there as well. And that is true, JJ. I did call Tevildo the Lord of Evil Cats, as if I were implying that there is also a subset of non-evil cats, which is harder to argue in Tolkien. I don't think we have any examples of good cats in Tolkien's entire corpus. I'm trying to think, even of like his non-Middle-earth stuff, I don't think we get any non-evil cats, do we?
There's the cat in the poem who's dreaming.
The cat poem? Yeah.
That's not a particularly evil cat.
It's not a particularly evil cat, even though its dreams are about, like, hunting and killing men. But yeah, it was a man-eater in, like, a former life, but still, I agree. It's,
not that cat who sits on a mat.
It is. That is, I agree that the cat on the mat poem is probably the most benign cat in Tolkien's entire imagination. Okay. Anyway, so sorry to offend cat people, but hey, like, Tolkien is so obviously a dog person. There just like is really no room for debate on this subject. Nope. Anyway, yeah, it's just the way it is. Okay, but Thuringwethil, her primary role, apart from being Sauron's confidant and sort of second in command and sounding board and all that kind of thing, advisor, has been spy. Right, we have seen her. She's transformed into a bat back and forth. Now, we did a thing with her cloak, right, where she has this like bat cloak that she wears, and she turns herself into a vampire. And when she turns herself into like the very large vampire bat, and of course, we do need to emphasize, vampire equals vampire bat. Like, that's just the word they used for vampire bat. I mean, as I have argued before, you can see even Dracula, in the Dracula book, uses the word vampire like that. Like, you see before people in England, when Dracula arrives, before they know anything about Dracula or what's going on with this undead creature, which is totally outside their worldview, they use the word vampire casually, meaning vampire bat. So it's pretty clear that that's what Tolkien meant. We see the vampire bats in The Hobbit as well, that fix themselves upon the stricken on the battlefield and everything, which is pretty creepy. Not really children's book material at that point, as I've argued before. But, and he uses the word there too, doesn't it? Fasten themselves vampire-like upon the stricken, if I'm remembering correctly, the line in The Hobbit. I think that's how the line goes. Yeah. Anyway, now JJ asks the really important question, will Thuringwethil speak with a Romanian accent? Which I think, isn't that... Don't you get sued if you have a vampire who does not speak in Romanian? I mean, isn't there like some kind of legal consortium out there who will hunt you down if you have a vampire who does not speak with a Romanian accent? I thought that was obligatory. Are we going to risk that? I don't know, but
Not worth it. Too big a risk.
it's exactly right. I mean, I don't think we can. I mean, it's one thing to do like this entire theoretical production, and risk the attention of the Tolkien estate, but the vampire with Romanian accents lobby is even scarier.
They're very litigious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to be cautious. But she's been a spy, right? When she's been transforming. So we had, for instance, this was season 4, right? That episode that we started with the whole helicopter shot, right, flying around, and it was when we were doing of Beleriand and its realms, right, and showing all the different places where the kings were building their fortresses and everything, and it was not apparent to the viewer that they were seeing, but they were basically, it was like Thuringwethil cam, vampire cam all the way through most of the episode, though that was only revealed at the very end, right, when we kind of panned back finally and saw that it was Thuringwethil flying around and spying on folks. And she has been very successful as a spy. So successful, and this is something that was raised in the discussion boards, that none of the good guys know that she exists, right? I mean, she's interacted, like we had, her big moment so far has been her deception of Círdan the Shipwright, right? When she masqueraded as one of the Noldor, right? She masqueraded as one of the Noldor, and pretended to let slip the business about the kinslaying, right? And in confidence to Círdan, and then she vanished after that. And that's how Círdan had his suspicions already, and that's how his suspicions got confirmed. She was one of the ones who ferreted out the secret of the kinslaying in the first place, because remember, none of the bad guys knew about the kinslaying. They had to figure it out too. So Thuringwethil was instrumental first in discovering about the kinslaying, and then in contriving to spill the beans to Círdan in a way that he wouldn't suspect, so that he could then go and start trouble with Thingol as Sauron had planned. But again, none of the good guys. No, if you ask the good guys, like, they know who Sauron is, especially now that he's taken Tol Sirion, right? He's come out in the open. But even without that, he's known, right? They don't know much about him. At the risk of getting sidetracked, what do they know about Sauron? How has Sauron interacted with... We know he's interacted with prisoners, of course, but like people who survived and lived to tell the tale. So
the first role that Sauron has with the Noldor and Beleriand is to capture Maedhros after the death of Feanor. So
right. Oh, right. He shows up at the Parley. He's the one who's leading the Parley, right? Forgot about that. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty public.
It was. Almost everybody who was there died who wasn't Maedhros.
But Maedhros didn't. So
yeah. But Maedhros didn't, and he escaped and got back. So Maedhros personally knows Sauron in that capacity.
Yes.
And has therefore passed that information on. As far as whether or not he had the name Sauron at that time, that's another question. It's been a little bit more open, but they know who he is.
Right. They know who he is. And
therefore, when Sauron wants to go among the elves, he has to go in disguise.
Right. As we had him and Thuringwethil both doing at the Merith Adothad, way back again, season 4. Mm-hmm. 4, right? Yeah, it was 4. Yes. Okay. So for the majority of folks, Sauron's involvement is a rumor. Gothmog, of course, also has an issue where a significant percentage of the named characters who see him have perished, but it's not the same. I mean, he's a spectacle on the battlefield, right? So many people have seen him from a distance, and so long as they saw him from a sufficient distance, they have survived to tell the tale. So they know about the captain, the Balrogs, and the captain of the Balrogs, and that he is often leading the orc forces into battle, and that it's really bad news when he does. Even, of course, the sons of Feanor would know him from the death of Feanor. That would have been certainly a memorable meeting with Gothmog in their minds. So lots of opportunity. And I wonder, probably do you think probably Finrod knows, like, that Gothmog killed his brothers? Do you think he would know that, or have heard tales from survivors, or even telepathically intuited it or something?
Right. Finrod definitely experienced the death of his brothers in the moment when it happened. So
Yeah.
the question is, was it just a, oh no, they're in pain and then they suddenly died? Or did he like see through their eyes as they were dying? Or like, we didn't
Right.
necessarily establish how close that telepathic connection is.
Right, yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. But I think one way or another, I mean, there were some people who did survive from that battle, so one way or another, I think we can count on the fact that Finrod knows that it was Gothmog who killed, and then therefore, I mean, that all of the elves know. So that with Fingon, it's going to be known. Like, there's going to be precedent about this. Gothmog as Slayer of Noldorin princes is going to be a headline. But my point is that Sauron is going to be a much lesser headline, by and large, right? He is a much lower profile figure, both figuratively and literally. But Maedhros will know him, and I would think from Maedhros' interactions with him, he himself, Maedhros himself, and through him the other lords of the Noldor, would have a sense that he was not just some chump, right? That he was an important lieutenant of Morgoth's, and possibly even have been able to figure out, or at least kind of guess, that he's kind of part of the brains behind the Morgoth operation, and very different, therefore, in his role from Gothmog. So when Sauron steps out of the shadows and takes Tol Sirion, he would be known by reputation, but his reputation would both very greatly increase and change at that time, right? And that's where I think I want to kind of come at that question from that angle. I'm kind of building up to it this way, because when we think about Sauron establishing his rule here, right, in large part, yeah, we can think about it from his side, and we need to think about it from his side, but I want to make sure we're keeping the context in mind. This is his coming out party to the good guys, really. I mean, he has interacted openly with very few good guys. Thuringwethil has interacted openly with zero good guys. Nobody knows she exists. And I agree that this is one of the challenges that we have in this episode, because there is no good guy who is going to see Thuringwethil and be like, you! You must pay for all that you have done. Like, she's done a bunch of things, but they don't know it. They wouldn't recognize, I mean, they might look at her and be like, you look creepy and probably evil, right? I should maybe do something about that, but it's not going to be personal. They're not going to have any idea, right? None of the good guys have any animosity towards her. Which means I think that kind of closes some doors for us in trying to figure out her story, right? There's no question of needing closure on an arc with somebody else, with the potential exception of Círdan, right? I mean, there was he didn't realize what was happening there, but we know there was some stuff between her and Círdan. But we can't bring Círdan in to this, and there's not enough. He still is living in ignorance about that anyway, so it's hardly satisfying in any case. Okay, anyway, so we have some work to do here to figure this out. So let's start at the beginning. Who is Thuringwethil? When Thuringwethil enters Arda, who is she? And what is she doing? She is a Maya, right?
Yeah.
Whose?
Like she has to be.
Seems like she has to be. Who's Maya?
There was some discussion on the boards as to who she was originally affiliated with. And one suggestion was Nienna, especially based on some of the earlier conceptions of Nienna with her house with bat wings in the roof and everything.
There are some connections there, yeah.
And then maybe Ormandos even.
Yeah,
Since
and just
she's into
for
secrets
people,
and Mandos knows everything.
right, yeah. For people who don't know about this, the first draft of Nienna. Marie, do you remember her name? The version of her name?
Fui. Fui.
Oh, Fui. Yes, Fui. Exactly. Fui was her original name. She was basically the queen of the underworld. Basically, she was like Mrs. Mandos, and she was very much a Queen of the Dead figure. Now, her character changes a great deal. So by the time we get to modern day Nienna, right, she's a long way from the Queen of the Dead Batwing decor figure that we get in the Book of Lost Tales Volume 1. Bjarnasonar, I like the idea of Vaire. Vaire was another one that I was thinking. Another candidate I think is a strong candidate is Irmo, actually, Lorien. Because of the dreams thing, right? Especially I'm thinking about the whole Dracula homage thing we did with Anail and her sort of entering his chamber by night and sort of stealing his dreams and thoughts out of his head and conditioning him and stuff. That as like a warped dream vision kind of thing, like taking the kind of dream vision connection that a messenger of Lorien might have and warping and twisting that into something sort of parasitic and controlling seems to me to work pretty well.
Yeah, I know we had talked a little earlier about having Glarung maybe originally have been one of Irma's people as well, so that would be an interesting connection that we'll never do anything with because we're gonna.
Right, and of course we know that Melian was one of Irmo's people,
Right.
so we've got Irmo's Maya all over. So on the one hand, that might be an argument against it. I mean, like, but having Thuringwethil be the kind of anti-Melian figure is a little bit interesting, actually. Especially with the Luthien connection, right? When I mean, I'm not saying we do something really corny, like, she meets her anti-mom, but that we do like, it's like, your evil mother figure, who is like the wicked stepmother or whatever. Like, obviously I'm not saying we go sort of as far as that, but having the two of them being sort of contraries to each other. I'm not really sure.
You just go all in on the connection and make her Melian's sister or something.
Right.
If you just really wanted to go.
Right. Hey, so Nick had a suggestion here in the chat. Nick's not able to join us in video here this week, but he's in the chat and was saying that we had talked about the possibility of having Mandos appear to the fallen in Dorthoni, and the summons, right? The summons of Mandos when the spirits of the slain elves are summoned to return to Mandos. What if Thuringwethil had been one of those like a reaper spirit, right? Whose job was to a sort of reaper / like Mercury spirit, to guide the spirits to the to the afterlife, essentially, kind of thing, right? And that so that her role would be kind of like a twisting of that. Associating her with Mandos is interesting too.
Yeah, and that that provides like a let's see, lay some groundwork for like how does Sauron get into this business, the necromancy business,
right.
Having Thuringwethil play a role in introducing him to some of those concepts or abilities.
Yeah, that at the very least he would be like, it would be kind of more on his radar screen, right? This whole like the issue of the spirits of the dead. I mean, this battle here, there have been dead elves before. I mean, there have been other battles before in which elves have been killed, obviously, but more of them in this battle than ever before. I mean, this is the largest number, certainly, of of Noldor slain that we've had.
By the way,
yeah.
I don't know. I think I like Mandos and Irmo better, better choices than Nienna. However, I think we should look for an opportunity to have one of Nienna's Maiar appear as in some kind of villainous role, because the idea of like a villainous version of Nienna seems very interesting.
It is, yeah.
Like taking the person who's sort of the aspect of like compassion, and twisting that somehow. I don't know where the right place to use that is, and I don't think Thuringwethil is it, but I think that would be cool.
I'm tempted to say retroactively to Vildo. The tormentor of the living, like the one who delights in causing pain.
Yes.
I mean, that was his primary characteristic, that he was a torturer, as I see Nick was just reminding in a discussion in the chat there as well. That would be one way that you could twist the pity of Nienna. Right now, it's a fairly simplistic twisting of the pity. I mean, I think we could probably do better than that. Come up with something kind of deeper and more profound. What would be not just like the mirror opposite, right, of pity, but you know, a more subtle twisting and corruption of it.
Not to steer us off too far off our path, but Glauron also would be an interesting opportunity there. So
yeah, we didn't really. It's actually fascinating to me that I don't think we've ever asked this question before, have we? Of Sauron's posse?
About Thuringwethil?
Like about any of them? Yeah.
True. Yeah. No.
Like where they came from?
Came up, it was an interesting
Yeah.
moment of like, wait a minute. Yeah. Where did these all come from?
Yeah.
Because the way he obtained his posse is they were already followers of Morgoth.
Right.
At the time of the First War.
Right.
So
right.
He's catching them from Morgoth. But where did they come from before that? Were they originally Morgoth's people, or were they from somewhere else? And that's not clear.
Right. Right.
Another suggestion on the boards was to make Thuringwethil unaffiliated. If her main characteristic is she likes to hunt out secrets, that maybe she was interested in what all the Valar were up to, and so never really like picked one. Right.
So make her a free agent in the Ungoliant line, but more, but smaller. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I don't know that we have to spell this out or show it on screen. The reason I wanted to start here with Thuringwethil is that I feel like I think that how we kill her and what would be a fitting end for her is only going to make sense if we can really first decide what her whole arc is, right? I think that once we decide what the whole rest of her arc is, the ending is going to be a lot easier to come up. Because right now, I mean, I got to tell you, I have no idea. I mean, there's some basic parameters, right? I mean, if somebody just said at the very beginning of this episode, how does Thuringwethil die and why, right? I would have been like, well, I think she's got to die at Tol Sirion. There's some other opportunities, right? I mean, I know people were suggesting some kind of cool thing, like she's killed in Dorthonion and, you know, Baron mails her pelt back home to Sauron. And so, like, that could work and it could be cool. But I think she should die at Tol Sirion. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, that she has to die at the same time as the construction or the destruction, of Tol Sirion. Indeed, if she dies a little bit earlier than that, it would help to explain why in the published story her death isn't narrated, right? Because it's not part of that story. There's a reason why Luthien is just like, hey, look, a pelt. Right, you know, like you know, here's a Badheim nobody's using anymore, right? I think I'll take that. If she had died beforehand, it would help to explain that rather than necessarily having to imagine that Luthien is going to like rip her Badheim off of her, you know, cooling corpse. Basically, like, I don't think it necessarily has to go down that way. So again, it doesn't really have to be a like, you know, duel between Luthien and Thuringwethil, you know, like some kind of personal grudge match between them. But anyway, like I said, I can think of lots of possible ideas, but I don't find any of them compelling. Like, I there's nothing in any of them to necessarily recommend one over the other. So this is why I want to go back. Let's make her story. And then once we have her story, then we'll have something to measure the other possibilities against, right, and see what fits best. So, okay, so what do we think? Do we want to go with Namo, Irmo? The Irmo mom thing, kind of cool, but that makes it very directly connected to Luthien, which we don't necessarily need. I kind of like the death thing. I kind of like that is the Namo thing, the Reaper idea. Unaffiliated is kind of cool, but I also kind of feel like an unaffiliated Maya is kind of a wasted opportunity. I mean, Dave, exactly like you were suggesting, it's really fun to think about, like, what an evil version of a Maya of Valar X is like. Like, that's a really fun exercise, and I would hate to deprive us of that if we don't really need to. So, I mean, like, we have textual reasons not to do that with, like, Ungoliant, for instance, right? Like, we know Ungoliant's a free agent, so we stick with that. But if we don't have a reason to not do it, I'd want to do it, right? So, I do think that we should save Nienna. What we've done with her, I mean, obviously we have the incidents, the Thuringwethil incidents that we've worked into the story all along as more or less fixed points. There have been a couple occasions when we've been like, maybe we can go back and edit that in season 4 or something, but we don't want to make a habit of that, right? We want to play the Tolkienian retcon game and take our written texts as established data points and work around them, right? That's what Tolkien shows is more fun. So at least that's what Tolkien found more fun himself. So that's how we'll do it too. So we have those fixed points already, and I don't see anything in the story of her as we have them. Her spying, her cunning and intelligence. Nothing there really kind of screams Nienna to me, right? Whereas again, I can see both dream connections through her in the sorcelment of Anile, especially, and then also her the death stuff with Namo, being able to use that, even to use her as a kind of inspiration for, or at least kind of facilitator in some sense of Sauron's necromancy brainwave, right, in episode 1 of this season. Yeah. Now you're right. You're right, Mike, that we actually have more known evil. We have a few evil Aulai Maiar and no known good ones. Aule folks go to the bad at a pretty sharp rate as far as we know, right? I'm sure he had more than 2, but the 2 that we know best went bad very emphatically. And then, of course, you get Feanor in there again, giving, like, smiths and makers a bad name, right? So it's hard. And then, of course, you've got Aule's own little misadventure, right, with the creation of the dwarves. So,
Aule is the House Slytherin of the Pantheon.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, let's keep her with the Fanturi. I think that one of those 2 works best. Maybe since we're doing the necromancy thing, it would be, well, let me ask this. Do we think that would be better, or, well, okay, all right, hang on, I keep refining my question. Do we think it would be better, or like it would enhance, or it would detract from the necromancy thing? If it's not Sauron's own insight, but if Thuringwethil's whispering into his ear, like, I've got an idea. How you could manipulate this. That would lower Sauron a little bit, right? Because it would. But this leads me to another question, which of course is a big question that people have been discussing on the discussion boards. Should there be a rift of any kind between Thuringwethil and Sauron? She's been loyal to him, right? She has been his most dependable, she's been his number 1 from pretty much the beginning of his independent plot lines, ever since he was successfully seduced by Melkor in season 1. But are we going to show her, like, true to the end and dying faithfully in Sauron's service, or are we going to have a division there? And of course, one of the things, remember, Tolkien himself pointed out that Sauron's fidelity, at least for a time, to Morgoth was his only redeeming point, right? Like, he was only less evil than his master in that for a while he served another instead of himself, right? Mm-hmm. we have to be a little careful. Thuringwethel's not a good guy, right? So like selfless devotion to Sauron's cause would seem counterindicated, right? And that's all we've shown from her so far. So it seems to me if we are gonna introduce, this is why I do sympathize with the idea of saying we need to introduce some tension between Thuringwethil and Sauron, because it can't be love and roses all the time, or one or both of them are being too good, right? You know, they're like, this is a classic problem, right? A classic problem in trying to depict consistent and convincing good guys and bad guys is like bad guys, you know, don't cooperate well, right? I mean, it's especially within, you know, Tolkien's ethos, the whole, you know, the desire to elevate yourself and to dominate others. This is like one of the defining things that sets apart the bad guys. So, yeah. I do think we should, yes. Anyway, it does seem plausible that they would quarrel to some extent.
Oh, yeah.
The reason that Thuringwethil has been so interested in Sauron's career thus far is that she's wanting to know everything there is to know about everything. Like, that's her interest in life.
Yes.
And the Balrogs weren't doing that for her.
Right.
So
right.
supporting Sauron gave her more opportunities. So it was self-interest from the beginning of backing the person that would give her the opportunities she wanted. And we've seen that play out, that she likes what has happened with all of his plotting.
Right. Right. And
would that come to an end, though? Would it reach to the point where he's no longer doing anything for her? Like, what have you done for me lately? Kind of thing. Or
that her own ambitions become larger or more independent and begin to diverge from his. Exactly. Such that being his faithful number one no longer is getting her to where she wants to go. Okay. So I agree. Sauron's whole approach, right? Sauron also has been interested in knowledge, right? Through knowledge to increase his own power. We saw this, of course, we were emphasizing this first, and I think most prominently in the whole orc storyline, right? His approach to corrupting elves, his scientific approach to corrupting. Scientific is a word we have used several times about Sauron, especially in his approach to the elves, the elves whom he was corrupting into orcs, or not orcs. That was not his plan, right? And then we've shown the difference between the kind of rough and raw domination that Melkor wields and used to make the orcs. So Thuringwethil went to Sauron. That's the period of time while Morgoth was imprisoned, right, is when Thuringwethil and Sauron got together. At that point it was just Gothmog and Sauron, right? Those were the only two options. They were clearly the two strongest of the villains left in Middle-earth when Morgoth was imprisoned. And to Thuringwethil it was clear. Maybe Gothmog would have used her as like a battlefield scout, right? He would probably have seen the value there. But I mean, it's nothing like what Sauron was doing and was willing to do. And even the way in which his plan, she has been completely on board with and a key player in his plan to sow dissension among the elves rather than merely to destroy them, right? Why? Well, because she doesn't want to just destroy them. She wants to. Here we take that the spy, like what do spying and like vampirism have in common, right? Both of them are about like sucking them dry, right? She wants all of their knowledge, right? She wants to know what they know. She wants to, but she wants it for herself. Again, like her idea of learning is not like to study at someone's feet and have a positive master-student relationship, right? Her vision is of like, leaving the dead, desiccated victim behind and being full of the, so it's actually like slightly Ungoliant-esque, right? Except spiritual instead of physical, right? Knowledge instead of light. Again, I'm not saying it's exactly like Ungoliant, but it's kind of in that direction. Her hunger for knowledge is kind of like Ungoliant's hunger for light. That would track. That would make sense, I think. So could we, is there a potential model here? Thinking about the falling out between Melkor and Ungoliant, right? Could there be a point at which she wants something that he doesn't want to give? Could it be what if it's the Well of Souls? What if it's the Cauldron of Evil in the basement? What if what he does to imprison the souls is the thing? It's her idea, the necromancy thing, right? You could enslave and harness these elf souls and use them for your own power and knowledge. I was emphasizing last time that, of course, necromancy, the word necromancy, means divination by the dead, like gaining knowledge from the dead. It's about gaining knowledge from the dead. Yeah, no, this is totally it, right? Yeah, I think we have it. I think we have the clear premise, especially if she is a fallen Namo Maya, right? Where they would differ is what we do with the trapped souls, right? Sauron wants to dominate them under his will and use them to augment his own power and what he can do. She wants to, and maybe she thinks, maybe the reason she suggested that he entrap them is that he's like, okay, again, I'm like 100% in the Mandos camp now because this works really well, right? She knows the Mandos project, right? She knows what's supposed to happen with these elf souls, right? And what is supposed to happen? They're going to get taken back to Mandos, and they're going to be instructed. They're going to be healed, right? They're going to be healed, sort of psychologically, healed spiritually. They're gonna gain, right? What does she want to do? She wants to suck them dry, right? She wants to decrease them. She wants to, instead of giving to them and healing them in the way that Mandos is going to do if they come over to Mandos, she wants to trap them here so that she can take from them instead of giving to them, right? To use them as a resource for herself, to accomplish her end, which if Ungoliant's mission statement, right, is a glut of light, right? To eat the entire universe until she is swollen so great that the universe can't sustain her anymore. If that's Ungoliant's mission statement, right? Thuringwethil's mission statement is similar. She wants to have all the knowledge, right? She wants herself to bring into herself everything that everybody else knows, until like her intellect is swollen so great that the universe can't sustain it, like the great bag of, like her brain is like the gut of Ungoliant, right? Kinda, right? All right, okay, a little bit. All right, okay. So she wanted to suck them dry, right? She wants to, interrogate them, but it wouldn't be like an interview process that she would be having, right? But she was hoping, thinking, planning that if she helped Sauron to trap these dudes, that she'd get them, right? So we could have a parallel scene to the withholding of the Silmarils from Ungoliant, right? Where she comes to Sauron and is like, and now, according to our agreement, give me them, or at least some of them, right? So that I can do what I want to do. And Sauron's like, no, they're mine, right? They're mine. I'm keeping all of them, and I want to preserve. I don't want them diminished, right? I don't want you to suck them dry. I want them to remain full of like vitality and power that I can draw on and increase myself. Because Dave, this is one of the things that we talked about last week when we were. I was thinking about how Sauron can be thinking of his necromancy plan as going in a different direction from Morgoth. He sees Morgoth distributing his own life, right? Pushing himself out, his own spirit out into all of his creatures. And he is watching Morgoth decrease, right? He's looking at him from the side and being like, yeah, this is bad, right? Look at him. He's a shell of his former self already, right? This is not the way. So instead he finds, and this is why the necromancy thing is such a breakthrough for Sauron, because this is where Sauron says, okay, instead of pushing my spirit out into others, I'm going to draw other spirits into myself, right? I'm going to augment my power instead of diminishing it the way that Morgoth is doing. And yeah, there's a, short-term gain for Morgoth, right? He's able to empower his creatures and make them stronger, and they're therefore able to accomplish his ends, and he's able to dominate them more thoroughly. Sure, that's all great, but big long-term loss, right? As Sauron sees Morgoth diminishing and diminishing and diminishing. And of course we know eventually that's where Sauron's going to go, right? But it's going to be a tragedy when that happens, right? It's going to be tragedy when he finally does walk down the same path. When
I was going to say, how does he go from this to the making of the ring?
Over the course of about 15 seasons is how he gets there. That's how. But remember, Sauron has a longer character arc than any other character in the entire show, right? There are only two characters who are going to span at least 90% of the show, right? And that's Galadriel and the Sauron. But Sauron is the main one, right? He's the only one who goes from the very beginning to the very end.
I'm wondering if is the ring, is the One Ring, is that a change in perspective or a refutation of this earlier project? Or can we come up with somehow how this is a step in that direction? The ring is like a riff. It's like version 2.0 of like,
right.
I'm going to strike this balance between these two perspectives.
Just as he dominated the spirits of the dead elves, right, with his cauldron of evil in the basement, right? So he threw the ring, and of course we're deliberately making there will be a ring of runes around the edge of the it's gonna evoke the ring of power. Those who know the Lord of the Rings should be able to look. It's obviously not going to be it's not going to it's going to be the same script, right? Like one cauldron to rule them all. It's not going to be anything like that. And yet it will clear, people who know the Lord of the Rings should look at this and say, this is the Alpha project. Right. This is the Alpha project that eventually he's going to develop into the Ring of Power. But you see how go ahead.
I was going to say, I wonder, adding on top of that, I wonder if you can point in that direction too by sort of drawing a parallel with Celebrimbor in that he steals somebody else's ideas and knowledge, and then maybe part of what happens with the cauldron is he goes off and does it himself and doesn't bring Thuringwethil along. She doesn't help. It's entirely it's a Sauron solo project. And
she might feel like he was stealing her gig, right? Yeah. That's also possible.
And when she finds out, she gets mad.
If they work together on the necromancy thing and raising an army of dead spirits or whatever, and they take Silmarillion, and so she's like, yeah, we're both in this together. And then she goes off and does something else. And when she comes back, there's this cauldron in the basement that she didn't know about. And the whatever runes of power written around it are like Sauron's property only.
That's right. Yeah. And she can't get in. She can't get access to them. Yeah.
Right. She might feel a little betrayed in that sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. And it will become clear to her that he is not going to share. Right, that he has taken. This was supposed to be a collaborative project, and the idea of, though it is a little bit attractive, Dave, as you were suggesting, to think of not this as a collaborative project gone wrong, right? That he that Sauron has gone all Mark Zuckerberg on the Necromancy project, right? Sorry, probably a dangerous parallel to make, but anyway, but at the same time, but again, alternatively, for it to be like a stolen technology story instead, right? That like he learns this from her, and then he adapts it and takes it, and she doesn't realize that he's getting, and then she's like, this was my gig, right? This was what I, like, he could oversee her, capture, like she could ensnare one of the souls of the dead, and he oversees that or something. But I kind of like the collaboration thing. Like if there's like betrayal or perceived betrayal involved, I think that's stronger, not to mention more efficient. Right. It makes it, because we're not going to have a lot of screen time for this, right? I mean, come on, Sauron and Thuringwethil, we have a lot to do in the Beren and Luthien season. Beren and Luthien are going to need a lot of screen time, right? We're not going to have a whole lot of minutes to show, a lover's quarrel between, not a lover's quarrel. They're not lovers. I should have mentioned, or should have recapped, that we've decided from the beginning not to make Thuringwethil sexy, right? She's not going to be wearing, like close-fitting leather unitards or anything like that. We wanted her to be a non-sexualized character in the story. That was a thing that we decided way back. So no feminine wiles involved in any of Thuringwethil's plots. Anyway, okay. So I say lover's quarrel, totally metaphorically. Anyway, the falling out between Thuringwethil and Sauron. If there is a sense of betrayal there, it would be quicker. It would be easier and quicker to show that in the very limited time that we're going to have to show that, I think. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think I would go for that. I would go for that instead. Yes. Okay. Sorry, Nick, you're right. It's the tub of evil. I forgot about the tub of evil. That was Nick's phrase for it last time. The tub of evil in the basement. Yes.
I think if we go with the collaboration gone wrong direction, that can once again tie into the One Ring. Sirens can take away from this is like no more working together. Yeah, exactly. And and sorry, we didn't kind of finish the Ring of Power discussion. A couple of people are pointing out like the obvious differences between what he does with the ring and what he's doing here with the Tub of Evil. Yeah, absolutely. Because how's the Tub of Evil going to work out for him? Right? That is going to backfire in a spectacular way, right? So when he goes back to the drawing board after this alpha project, right, he's gonna see, all right, on the drawing board, this whole idea of like increasing my power by subjecting others instead of was a good idea, right? And let's see how we can work with that, right? But that spectacularly did not pan out. So maybe, we are going to need to bring him by gradual steps to the point where by the Third Age, he's doing exactly what Morgoth did. And he is spending himself and lessening himself through domination of the orcs, and also what he's having to do to subject the Haradrim. And there's a lot of power he's going to be distributing. And of course, the Ring of Power itself is going to be the turning point, right? When he comes to this is the cool thing. I was going to say, Amazon people, pay attention, but it's too late. It's already in the can, so we'll see if they got this right. But the forging of the Ring of Powers, this is a crisis point for both sides, right? This is a crisis point for Celebrimbor, of course. It's like a critical decision, right, that Celebrimbor makes, which backfires on him spectacularly. But it's a turning point for Sauron too, right? This is that's the turning point in Sauron's career. The forging of the Ring of Power is the turn, and the whole Rings of Power gambit with Celebrimbor and his forging and his decision to forge the Ring of Power. That's the turning point in his career. That's when he is. From that point on, it's all downhill for Sauron. That is the tragic moment, right? The tragic fall of Sauron
I mean, he's already fallen, right, in one sense of like joining the bad guys and becoming evil. But where his trajectory turns and starts to decline, really, is at the Forging of the Ring of Power. I think, like in middle of the Second Age, that's when it's over for Sauron. And so, yeah, it's a different idea. It's connected. We can see lots of connections, right? Lots of relations and ways that we can relate the necromancy thing to the Ring of Power thing, but it's not at all the same. And that shift in policy is ultimately Sauron's undoing, right? That's the tragedy that leads him down into the void.
That backfires even more than this one.
Even more than this one, right? But not as quickly, though, right? It has a longer life, at least. I mean, of course, Sauron's stuff always backfires. Footnote.
He has a bad
all bad guys' plots all eventually backfire. Like, that's never not true. When is that not true? It's always not. It's always true, right? But I mean, like every evil character in Tolkien ultimately undoes himself, right? I mean, Ungoliant, who at last ate up herself, is like the paradigm. Like, she's like the platonic form of what happens to bad guys in Tolkien, right? Every single one of them does that. Whether it's Gollum, whether it's Saruman, whether it's Grima, whether it's Sauron, whether it's Morgoth, all of them. Everybody does this. But now, notice one of the corollaries of what I was just saying, which I thought was a digression, but watch how cunningly I bring this into relevance to today's discussion. His defeat by Luthien and Huon is not the turning point of his career. That is, I think that his story arc is still ascending after his defeat. Like, it's a setback, right? It's like a local trough. He doesn't have a smooth rise, right? But this is not. It's not all downhill for Sauron after he meets Luthien and her dog, right? This is part of it's a rocky point, but this is still part of his. It's not until he forges the Ring of Power that things are all going to change. That's just one thing that I would put forward for when we're not there yet. We still need to focus on Thuringwethil, but when we get to the point of thinking about what happens to Sauron afterwards, right? Where does he go? And all that kind of question. I think we have to remember he's still on the make here for some time. This is a setback, and a fairly spectacular setback. But yeah, okay. So Mike, what a wonderful question. In the case of Thuringwethil, how does she backfire? What a wonderful way to focus this. Thanks for that. Yeah. Her greed for knowledge, which is going to set her at odds with Sauron. Okay. So if there's this betrayal, this perceived betrayal of Sauron, right? Or by Sauron, rather. What would she do?
She could try to steal the souls from him in some way.
Hey, what if Thuringwethil's interference or attempted interference helps to show to the viewers what will happen if you set the prisoners free? She's going to try to set them free. Not because she desires their freedom, but because she wants to steal them. She can try to break into the tub of evil, right? She can try to burgle the tub of evil is what she's going to do, right? Grand theft, dead elf, right? Is what's going to... What was that? Deadway. That was the name of the elf that we decided... Dave, that we were going to have Deadway be the red shirt elf. Well, post red shirt, really. I don't know what color even of shirt one wears when one shows up dead at the beginning of the season, but anyway, so when Deadway, our token dead Noldor, right? She's going to try to steal him, right? Not him personally, after him personally, but she can try. So she's gonna. She would try to burgle it, and he would stop her, right? So, and again, like, I'm not saying we do like a really overwrought thing of like no, like, you cannot break, like, the runes, or else, like, this is exactly, because if anybody did that, this is exactly what will happen. I mean, obviously that could be done in an extremely hokey manner, and we wouldn't do that. But again, like, if we wanted to introduce the idea of the peril, right? To let the viewers know that the Tub of Evil, which is the center of Sauron's newfound power, is also the weak spot, right? The potential self-destruct mechanism that could bring everything literally crashing down, right? If something happens with it. I mean, that could just happen. I mean, Luthien could set them free and they bust out and the whole tower explodes. And I think that that could be satisfying enough without previous explanation. But the idea that Sauron has himself, through the power that he has gotten, created the opportunity for his own downfall seems like a thing we might want to signal in some way. And so a potential burgling or attempted burglary, right, by Thuringwethil could be a way to, but I'll leave how that might be handled in the hands of better script writers than myself.
I'm very excited for some like Indiana Jones like
yeah, right,
action scenes here.
Thuringwethil sneaking in and getting past the like booby traps and spears and darts and things.
I mean, there's a reason I'm calling it the Well of Souls instead of the Tub of Evil.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That was
Right.
not lost on me, Marie. I cut that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So we're getting close to, but have not yet arrived at the answer to the question, how does she die and who kills her? Because it's beginning to look like Sauron might kill her.
I like that. I like
Doesn't
that
it?
a lot. Yeah.
I mean, if she is not only not useful anymore, but now an active, she has been one of his greatest assets, so, to date. But if she is now working against him, right, he could get rid of her or seek to get rid of her.
So he would choose the power of his captive souls over someone who has faithfully served him for many years at this point. Like, we're going to show him making that decision.
Well, first of all,
That's
first
a
of
pretty
all,
significant step
yeah,
for
well,
him.
First of all, he totally would. I mean, again, like, what, is he loyal? Is he going to be like, oh no, I'm going to put the well-being of my number two over my own power? Like, no, he's not going to do that, right? So if it's a choice, but because remember, there's a direct conflict here. His choice is not just like, do I, screw her over or do I not screw her over, right? His question is like, she wants this new power source that I have found, like this thing which is going to make me, because this is the prototype, right? Oh man, like I'm gonna build a bigger one. I'm gonna get the giant swimming pool of evil, right? And it's gonna be awesome. Like he's got plans, and she's now working against him there,
Yep.
right?
She's become a liability.
Right, and not only a liability, she's actively attempting to undermine his power play, right? She's a rival now. To what? So it's to him it would be the success of his plan, his necromancy plan, or Thuringwethil. It would be an act of self-sacrifice of Sauron to remain loyal to her, and he's not going to do that, right? But anyway, so. But I do agree. I would love an element of Thuringwethil bringing about her own destruction. I don't just want him to execute her or something boring like that. Being like, then, my dear, you must die, right? Like, we don't need something like that. Like the Bond villain turns on his, beautiful female assistant moment, or like, anyway, we don't need that. But they're going to be antagonists to each other now. Like, they're going to be rivals. He's going to see her as a rival. how would she end up bringing about her own destruction? She could destroy, but see, I don't think she can destroy herself at the Well of Souls, right? Because if the Tub of Evil destroys, like the Tub of Evil, like, is in a binary state, right? Either it remains intact and his power source remains operational, or it is broken and the tower is destroyed. I don't see a third way where she like cracks it and, you know, it gets blasted like the, you know, Nazis in the Raiders of the Lost Ark or something like that, right? Like, I don't see that.
Would she attempt her theft while he's distracted with Luthien at the gate?
Ooh.
Because if so, having the thing explode in her face is now an option.
Yes.
Right, yeah. So she's there trying to figure out how to get into that sucker, right? And then it blows up in her face, right? Yeah. Now, there is the potential issue of, I saw people asking questions about like, how do we preserve her pelt in this case, right? How can we still keep her cloak around? It does, when we say explode, right? It doesn't have to be like a flaming explosion, right? I mean, it's a burst of energy. We can decide what it physically, like what it does to her. And besides, what does it even mean to say what it physically does to her? She's a spiritual being, right?
Yeah, it's more nuclear reaction, less explosion.
Yes. Yeah. And by the way, this is an issue with her anyway. Does she have a body? I don't think she has a body. Draugluin has a body because Draugluin is a werewolf, right? Draugluin is a Maya spirit that Sauron has spliced together with a physical wolf, right? So there remains a physical wolf carcass when Draugluin dies, which can be skinned and used as camouflage, right? But I don't think Thuringwethil has a body. I think she's just a Maya who's physically manifested.
Right. So what gets left behind is her magic cloak.
Her cloak.
Which, when you put it on, turns you into a bat, I guess.
Yeah.
Right,
Or at least that's what it does for Luthien. Yeah. So I think so we could say only her cloak is physical, that her cloak could be, and we don't have an origin story of her cloak, right? So we have no way to communicate this, unless we do some.
We've shown her using.
Yeah, we have shown her using.
Wearing the cloak, and then she turns into the bat, and
Right. So I mean, it could be, and we've made it deliberately batty, right? And we've definitely played that up before. So if this is an actual physical garment, which she has like infused with some of her own power, in some way, right? Like it's like the bat cloak of power, little power. Anyway, whatever. She's empowered this cloak in some way, but it's a physical cloak, so it's left behind, right? Because like other Maiar, physical Maiar, right? Maiar in physical form who are killed. We have precedents for this, right? Plenty of those. The physical body is, remember Saruman, right? Remember what happens to Saruman at Bag End. His body collapses and crumbles, and his spirit rises up and then is dismissed, right? So presumably something like that is what would happen to, no matter what her cause of death was, right? Physical cause of death. That's what would happen to her carcass. It wouldn't leave a carcass because no corpse remains, because she doesn't have a real body. But her cloak could be real. So in that sense, I don't think... and yeah, hey, see, Kanji Do4 was just thinking exactly the same thing I was thinking about there we go. See, yeah, just like the Ring of Power. Exactly. See, so that's two of us. We totally agree. It's the bat cloak of power that nobody talks about. Anyway, yeah. So I'm not pushing on that too hard. But the point is, it's a physical cloak. So however she dies, her cloak remains behind. So all that but what does have to happen, Marie, and this is still a problem with her having the Well of Souls blow up in her face, is that her cloak would then certainly be buried under all of the rubble. So unless we have the Well of Souls itself clearly visible, right? We'd have to manage the destruction, the blowing up of the tower in a particular way. It couldn't just collapse down onto it would have to be blown up and fall over. Anyway, the Well of Souls would have to be exposed with her cloak sitting there in order for Luthien to find it. We can manage that. We do have Baron buried under all that rubble, but that's okay. We can work that out. There's lots of ways in which we could work that out.
I'm quite confident that there's a domed ceiling in the basement of Tulsirian. It's fine. It'll be structurally sound despite the collapse of the rest of the tower.
Obviously Finrod would have built like a fallout shelter in the sub basement of Minas Tirith. So clearly, and that's where you would store your deepest, darkest prisoners, right? Like if you had a captive elf lord of very significant power, right? You'd keep him down in the fallout shelter, right? Okay, we'll work on that when we get to Baron and Finrod in the basement. But I'm not worried about that. There are lots of ways in which that's manageable. But Nick, I can see, of course, I do see the point that the cloak can survive in the same way that Baron does. But my point is that it can't survive in the same place that Baron does. Like, it can't be. I don't think we can actually have them.
Finrod was in prison next to the Well of Souls.
Next to the Well of Souls. Yeah, I don't think they're in the same room, So we either have, it's fine. Like, in order to preserve it, we'd have to preserve 2 locations, which is possible. We could do that. But what are other options? With this storyline that we've been developing here, this particular quarrel, this betrayal, one of the other, by Sauron and Thuringwethil, the Well of Souls blowing up in her face, her desire for knowledge, leading in that way directly to her own destruction and her own betrayal of Sauron immediately coming back to bite her. Both seem good. Both seem to work for me a lot.
What we lose there is that it's not that he killed her. So if we wanted a confrontation between the two of them where he directly kills her, then that's not happening in this scene.
Could he ominously foretell her death? Could he threaten her and say that he, if she does this, she will surely die?
Touch me again, and you yourself shall be thrown into the fires.
Something like that. Something like that. In that direction. Yeah, in that direction. But something that sounds like a personal threat, like if you try to do this, I will kill you, which could lead the viewers to expect a final confrontation between the two of them, right? But of course, that's not, in fact, how it turns out. That I think could be a sort of interesting and satisfying end of their conflict. One of the other advantages of this too, though, is it could lead Sauron to feel smug about it afterwards, right? Potentially. See, look, Thuringwethil she betrayed me and she got what was coming to her, right? I mean, he didn't come off so well in the whole, Luthien and Huon situation, but he did come out best in the conflict with Thuringwethil, right? He survived, she did not. And what's more, she died exactly like he said he won. His prophecy came true. His enemy was destroyed just as he said she would be. So, I mean, even from his point of view, Sauron's point of view, it would be a satisfying ending to that, which again I think is a good thing. We want him. He's going to need a little pick me up. He's going to need something to feel good about after this, I think, because again we don't want a shattered and broken Sauron at the end of this. Humiliated, right? Yes. Inconvenienced, having lost massive quantities of face with the rest of the villains. Yes, but his own spirit is going to be unbroken.
Does the explosion of the call? So I'm wondering, like, what do we think? What do we think if Sauron's plot were revealed to Morgoth? How would Morgoth take it? And is there a possibility that one angle for Sauron is like, at least everything's covered up? Like Thuringwethil takes out Tol Sirion and destroys all the evidence, and she's not there to tell anybody. So Sauron gets to move on, and he's like on to phase 2.
That's actually really interesting. What would anybody know of what happened? Like, would anyone understand? The tower blows up, right? Luthien might have some insight into what happened, right? She will somehow sense or whatever the souls there, right? We'll come back to this later because this involves how the fight with Sauron goes, Huon and Sauron, and then Luthien's confrontation, and like she extorts information from him which enables her to destroy the tower. So there has to be that element there, and we haven't fully, I don't remember that we worked out that particular piece of it. But let's come back to that later when we do that from Luthien's perspective, I think. But so with the potential exception of Luthien and possibly of Beren, who would not really know firsthand at all what happened, other than all of a sudden the ceiling is gone and I'm looking up at the stars now and, oh, look, it's Luthien, and a very large dog. So Beren has no idea what happened, though she could tell him. Huon might have some insight into what happened. Hey, Huon might recognize Deadway. But anyway, Huon might have some insight into what happened. Luthien would have some insight into what happened, but neither one of them has a very long career in which they're going to be spreading the news of this necessarily. By the time they're interacting with other people, either of them, Huon or Luthien, they've got bigger things on their mind, right? You know, we've got Baron's dying. We need to hunt Karkaroth, right? I mean, it's you know, there's the Silmaril is in play. Are they even talking about, you know? Oh yeah, meanwhile, there was something weird going on in the basement in Tol Sirion, and here's how that went down. And certainly among the bad guys, right? Sauron is clearly the only survivor of the fallout at Tol Sirion. And he's not going to tell anybody any of it. He's not going to tell anybody either what he was doing and attempting to do, because that was a power play. Remember, his idea is Morgoth is dispersing himself and weakening himself further and further. And if he can upgrade, right, from the tub of evil to the wading pool of evil, to the swimming pool of evil, right, to the like vast ocean of evil. I mean, if he can upgrade, he could surpass Morgoth. I would think that would be his ambition, right? So he's not going to tell Morgoth anything about this, right? Like, you know, like Ixnay on the Necromancy nay, right? Like, he's not going to breathe a word of any of that. He might get asked, right? I heard stories, necromancy, dead spirits, what's going on? No idea what you're talking about. He's not going to tell anybody. And he's certainly not going to tell anybody what happened. So what are they going to know? They're going to know that they're going to see the wreckage, right? They might feel the rumbles. There might be witnesses who see from a distance the mushroom cloud, right, where Tol Sirion was, and there's what are they going to think? What would they think? Would they think, could he spin this? would they think that the Valar had smitten it? That this was judgment from above? I mean, I know it seems unlikely because they don't seem to be in that kind of business. But, like, what else could do that? None of the Elf Lords could do it. I mean, if anybody could do it, it would have been Finrod, right?
Yep.
And he couldn't do it. He couldn't. I mean, Sauron beat him toe to toe. And even Morgoth would know that Finrod couldn't do it. None of them could do it.
Saruman's use of gunpowder
Yeah.
being a step above what anyone's capable of, or okay.
Yeah, because I mean, it's what could have, all they will know, the bad guys will know, Sauron had established a new stronghold, and it was a great stronghold, right? I mean, it's not like, it's still much lesser than Angband, obviously. Like, it's not a rival to Angband yet, right? But it's like another data point, right? This is not like a camp. This is not, Sauron is setting up for himself in a big way, in a critical strategic location, right? So from the villain's perspective, this is a really good thing. Gothmog is not going to like it, right? Because this looks like Sauron's doing well, right? He's achieving something here, which is going to undermine Gothmog. So here, Sauron, villain number 2 or 3, depending on if you ask Gothmog, has set up for himself this critical new bastion of evil, and then blammo. It is just destroyed as if by the fist of God. What are they going to think?
They can't know that it's Luthien or think that it's Luthien, because the very next thing we see the villains interact with Luthien, they have to completely underestimate her.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
it's not like
exactly right. No one's going to look at it and be like, "Oh man, that's got Luthien written all over it." Right? Luthien's on the loose, blowing up towers. Right? Look out for Luthien. Right? Yeah, I know you're right. No one can. Melkor certainly can't be thinking that way. Certainly can't. Or else he's not going to be like, "Oh, look, it's Luthien. Maybe I'll sit here and watch her dance." Right? Like that's not. He's we can't have anybody in Angband being like, "Look out, it's the blower up of towers. Who's here in Angband? We're all doomed." Right? That can't be their reaction.
If anybody was going to react that way, it would be Melkor. He might be the only guy who would look and say, "That was very impressive," and still manage to underestimate her.
It's possible. It's possible.
I don't think they would all look and say, "Oh man, that was definitely Luthien," but people might sort of searching for an explanation might wonder, and it might make her like an object of like not necessarily just fear, but also like fascination. Like, is that
fascination,
did
speculation?
She have done this? What did she do? You know, like it seems to me like the idea that she might have done that might actually intrigue Melkor. Would he be secretly satisfied watching Sauron's tower blow up? Like, I think he would probably be happy, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I doubt that Melkor feels threatened, right? In Sauron's own fantasies, I think he wants to rival Morgoth, but I don't think Morgoth feels threatened.
No, I don't
right?
think he feels threatened, but I'm sure he like would take a certain amount of Schadenfreude from it, like watching,
right.
even knowing that his ambitions can't really endanger Melkor, he would probably nonetheless be happy to see those ambitions fall apart.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, and as far as Nick was saying, Sauron didn't witness the fall of the tower. Oh, I think he should witness the fall of the tower. We can arrange that. All he has to do is beat a tactical retreat from the situation with Huon and Luthien there. He doesn't actually have to vanish over the horizon before the tower goes, right? I think that Sauron's move, because his center of power is still there, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that he flees from a distance and he's looking at the tower and he's like, okay, all right, plan B, right? If I can re-infiltrate and then boom, right? Okay, plan C, I'm going to go somewhere else and start a new plan A right now because it's time to sell my stock in Tol Sirion. Yeah. I just thought of the only other person in play in Middle-earth who could be theorized as having that much power it would be Melian.
Melian.
Right?
And that, given Luthien's involvement, it seems plausible.
Right. So they might suspect Melian's, like, did Melian come and do this? I mean, like, if Finrod couldn't do it, who could? Well, there is one of the good guys who's greater, right? Like, by an order of magnitude than any of the elf lords, right? And that's Melian. But this could then lead to speculation about Luthien as well, right? Because she's an unknown variable. I mean, it's Melian's daughter. What do you get? What do you get, in fact? Literally no one knows, because this has never happened before. Luthien is unique, right? What do you get when you cross one of the greatest of the elf lords with one of the Maiar, right? So maybe, again, I'm not saying that we show the boardroom villain discussion of the Tolsirian fallout, right? So, satellite photograph has detected, right, the wreckage where Tolsirian the smoking crater where Tolsirian used to be. Any theories as to what on earth happened to Sauron, and is it because he's not around? I don't think he goes limping back to Angband for sure. So he's not around to participate in this discussion, right? So they're speculating. So I'm imagining here, and again, we're not depicting this scene, but I'm imagining, right, Morgoth and Gothmog and Glaurung and maybe, Bulldog sitting around a board table, a conference table, talking about this. What happened at Tolsirian? Somebody would suggest Melian, right? None of the elf lords could have done this. It must have been Melian. And then somebody would be like, or that daughter of hers, right? Mm-hmm. Concerning which there might be rumors that she's on the loose, right? So that would pique his interest. He would know what she could have done or how she could have managed this, right? And so that could explain why he doesn't just smite her or whammy her when she shows up, right? When he's like, let's see, what she got anyway, right? Like, let's see, because again, he's not threatened. He's not going to fear for himself, right? He's going to be like, let's see what she's got.
So his approach is to give her enough rope to hang herself. Is his approach to
Yeah, exactly.
That's a very that does seem in character with him.
And this is, have you noticed, Marie, how this also gets us out of the simple prurience reading of his watching her dance, right? We have more than some kind of Morgothian sexual arousal to explain the expectation of Luthien dancing. So that's a freebie. That's a freebie in this plot line. But okay. Sauron, though. Okay. Well, we can figure out the survival of the... So are we going with the Well of Souls blows up in her face? Cause of death for Thuringwethil?
I like it.
Yeah.
One other possibility that I would toss out here.
Okay.
That might help with the pelt problem too. What if the well blows up in Thuringwethil's face? She survives, she escapes, and then Sauron comes across her and finishes her off.
After they've both been defeated, right?
Yes.
So she's like a shattered wreck crawling away, and he's a shattered wreck bleeding from the throat, right? Yeah. Holding in his jugular, right? And trying to keep from bleeding out, and he offs her. Yeah. Right. Could work. I mean, there's a certain visceral satisfaction in it. The final... Nick says, it's an evil version of Hurin and Morwen. Oh, that's horrible, Nick.
But yeah, what it provides is the opportunity to finish up that storyline. They
right.
see and confront one another.
Right.
Whereas if she was sneaking down there, while
He would
was
never even
busy
know.
elsewhere,
Yeah.
he wouldn't have known she was there. So we wouldn't be able to like close the story with the characters. The audience would see and know what had happened, and it was her choice that led to her death. But it wouldn't be like him directly killing her, other than whatever prophecy prophetic statement he would utter earlier. So having a way to tie it up at the end and have him actively kill her, would change that.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, Mike. Of course, Horin doesn't kill Morwen, but that's the point. Like, that's the good end. They're the good guys. You know, they sit sadly next to each other while she dies. That's why it would be a reversal. Wow, Nick, thank you for that hideous image of the anti-Hurin in Morwen. But except they're meeting by the gravestone of their own ambitions, right? Instead of their children, not their literal children. But anyway, let me say this, Nick. I'm not sure that I would want to invest very much in that parallel, but let me just say that if the two of them sit next to each other in a similar posture to what Hurin and Morwen will eventually adopt, so that we have like a very subtle visual parallel going on there, except it ends with Sauron like throttling Thuringwethil or something, I wouldn't object. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I think this show has already been a success, and not only just because I got to use the word prurience, which so rarely comes up in casual conversation. So that's a win all by itself. But I think that this, I think that works. We'll see. Here I would definitely defer to the script writers if it like works out to do the two of them meet and he kills her at the end. It does preserve her cloak, even if that means her cloak is a little bit off, out of the way. But that's fine. Huan can find that. That's not hard. And in fact, Huan is the one who brings it to Luthien, right? So that actually tracks really well. That he comes back from scouting the perimeter and is like, found this bat cloak lying there near a pool of Sauron's blood. Not sure what went down there, but here's a bat cloak. Okay. Huan wouldn't know where to look. Again, but he's got a very good nose, right? He'd just be scouting, and he'd smell it. He would certainly, one thing that Huan would certainly take upon himself. Huan is wise enough to know that Sauron probably did not just vanish over the horizon when he fled, right? He's not going to trust Sauron to have just fled. So while Luthien and Beren are having their touching reunion moment, right, Huan is going to take it upon himself to do something useful and give them some personal space, and he's going to go out and make sure that Sauron isn't lurking and arranging some kind of ambush. And in doing so, he is going to find he would find, in this case, the bat cloak next to a pool of Sauron's blood, which is no longer there, and drips which vanish off into the horizon. So then he would know that Sauron has in fact left, and would inevitably find it there. When following the trail of Sauron, who would be leaving a trail on account of bleeding from the neck, as is explicitly described in the text. I was going to ask if we're sure that Maiar in physical form can in fact bleed out. But yeah, that's how Saruman dies. So, he gets his throat cut, doesn't he? Yeah, Grima cuts his throat. So, clear precedents. Although, I mean, Saruman's a different case. His body is presumably different, but
He's
Nice-
a little bit
nice
more
connection.
incarnate.
yeah, exactly. But anyway, yeah, we still have some neck wound precedents. Okay.
I like that. I like the word choice, Marie. A little bit more incarnate.
A little bit more incarnate. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Concerning
Sauron's
which,
still at the stage where he can change form.
yeah. Though if you are interested in listening to me rant about Tolkien waffling on the point of the incarnation of the Astari in the nature of Middle-earth, tune in on Wednesday this coming week when I shall be ranting on that very subject. In slide number 1 of this coming Wednesday's discussion. I like completely facepalmed when I read that passage in the nature of Middle-earth. I'm just like, Tolkien, don't even go there. But anyway, we'll get there. So, all right.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
That's why we're all here.
Exactly. We were doing great with beards and everything, and then here we go with the incarnation of the Istari. But whatever. Anyway, we're not talking about that now. Okay, so I think this works. I think that if we, I mean, there's a chance of the, Sauron throttling Thuringwethil or however we play that, as you know. I mean, there's definitely like some significant cheese potential there that we'd have to be cautious about. But I think it doesn't have to be cheesy. So I think that we could probably manage. But as I say, I'm happy to defer to the discretion of the screenwriters, which is just as well, as they will certainly take that discretion whether or not I leave that in their hands. So, so it's all good. I might as well submit to it from the start. Okay. Yeah, this works for me. There's some Sauron questions that we can't answer. But one last thing, just kind of where Sauron goes from here. I don't think he reports back in. I don't think he returns to Angband. He doesn't go dragging back to Angband. I think that his own pride would militate against that. I think he'd vanish. I think he'd go dark for a while. But again, I don't think he feels himself to be defeated. It's a setback, right? It's an embarrassing setback if anybody discovers the truth. But what he's going to do is he's going to go off somewhere else. He's going to think of a plausible story, right? And then he's going to recover, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the suggestion that I've heard that I like best, what seems to me to best fit the bill as an answer to the question, one of the big questions that we've been looking forward to asking for years now, what does Sauron do for the rest of the First Age after the Lay of Leithian, right? Because he vanishes from the published Silmarillion and is never heard from again until after the War of Wrath. So he is completely dark as far as the published text is concerned. But obviously he has to be doing something. And I think the answer that I like best is that he is the one who is stirring up the Easterlings, that basically the whole Ulfast plot is ultimately has its origin with him. This is attractive for several reasons. One, it's a very Sauron-esque stratagem. I mean, who else is going to have that plan, right? That has our Sauron's fingerprints all over it. To send over these false agents to lure Maedhros into complacency and to use that to stick it to Maedhros personally. I mean, that's even better, right? From Sauron's perspective. And, and then like, so train them up and recruit them and send them in as false agents. I mean, again, there's none of the other bad guys that we have developed that's a Sauron plot. If I ever heard one, our Sauron plot, right? In the First Age. So it fits him really well. What's more, it's a fun precedent, right? What's going to be his next plan? So his first plan in setting up on his own, now that he's made the decision, which we set up at the end of season 5 with his, the moment of Sauron's disillusionment when he watches the embarrassing spectacle of Fingolfin wounding Morgoth, right? This is the moment where Sauron says, how the mighty have fallen, right? I can't follow this guy anymore. Look at this. Okay. Look, he's limping, for crying out loud, right? I mean, this guy is losing it, right? I need to detach myself. I can do better. I can do better on my own. I maybe can even contrive a way to rival Morgoth himself in time and take over as the big boss, right? So he's in business for himself from the end of season 5 when he sees that. This is his first gambit. Tol Sirion is his first gambit. It's local. It's like right there because he's cloaking it as, look, I'm playing for the team, right? Minas Tirith completely, this is like the doorway to the rest of Beleriand, right? So like, look at me playing for the team. Now that I'm here in Tol Sirion, there's free range for the orcs, and look, everybody, including Gothmog, can be super grateful for what I've just done, right? He looks like he's playing for the team, but really he's setting up on his own. Well, that blew up. Well, not in his face, in his underling's face, but that worked out too. Anyway, so that didn't work out. So what's his next plan? His next plan, I'm going to go over the mountains and I'm going to try setting, I'm not giving up on the plan, right? The plan of setting up my own power. Cause that actually, like, there were pros and cons to be taken away. Doing a full analysis, right, of the Tol Sirion experiment, of the Tol and Gowerhoth experiment. It was on balance a failure, but there were definitely some things that we can build on, right, from that experiment. So, okay, we're going to go across the mountains and we're going to begin dominating kingdoms of men, right? And again, he's going to carry on doing this until finally he's going to get to Mordor and he's going to be dominating the Easterlings and the Haradrim. So, like, this sets him on a familiar to us trajectory. Like, it puts him down the road that we're going to want him eventually to go. So I think that could totally, and of course, but he's not far. He's just on the other side of the mountains. And he's going to keep a low profile for a while. But see, I think what his plan would be is, I can't go back now because I'm weakened and embarrassed, right? But if I just vanish for a while and they don't know where I am, and then I reemerge with like a new stratagem, which is going to pull the villains' biscuits out of the fire again, because Gothmog is being a moron again, right? And Bulldog is doing nobody any good. But I'm going to come in and I'm going to save the day, which again, note how that tracks, right? Without the betrayal of Ulfast, the elves might have won the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, right? There you go. There's Sauron's contribution to the team, right? And so the Nirnaeth Arnoediad will be the moment where he is like sort of restored to favor, where he's able to come back and be like, see, it was all part of the plan, boss, right? The Tol Sirion thing didn't work out, but I rebuilt, right? I took myself over to the other side of the mountain. I built up this thing, and now look, we won the Nirnaeth Arnoediad thanks to me, right? But he doesn't, so at that point, after the Nirnaeth, he's kind of back in the game, but he can be low profile until then. And anyway, so that's kind of my projection for Sauron. And what that means for him later on, Nick has ideas about things he could be doing during the fall of Gondolin. Yeah, I can see him involved in that plot as well, in that moment as well, for sure. But anyway, this seems like a direction that he would go, which fits with the text. Why does the text not mention him? Because he's not there. He's not in Beleriand. And he wouldn't come back until the story in Beleriand is focused on other things, like Glaurung establishing himself as the Dragon King of Beleriand, for instance, right? That's a bigger deal. The Easterlings taking over Dorloman, that's a big deal, right? So Sauron doesn't enter the story again because he never again, until after the War of Wrath, plays an open role again. He's going to have to be further behind the scenes.
But we can give him things to do then, like that at least gives us the opportunity
Absolutely.
to use him. Because if he's only off screen for season 7 and we're actually showing what he's doing off screen in some ways, then we didn't like drop him as a character. So yeah, I think that has a lot of potential for
this.
Yeah,
This is great. This is a great idea. It also provides some some foreshadowing for Oldfast instead of like they just show up out of nowhere
and are intrinsically deceitful. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we can get, this means we can build a whole Easterlings arc into season 7, right?
Yes.
Which is like the foreshadowing, the anticipation of what's going to be happening in Harad and Rune, right?
Yep.
It can be exactly the same. Once again, we can show Sauron learning from, this is the alpha version of that, right? And so we can see when he does it again later on, he's going to do it differently and stuff, and he'll have learned some stuff.
Right, because like Bor's obviously not going to go along.
Yeah, it's not a complete success. It's not a complete.
Right.
I mean, it pans out. It pans out, but it was a little too close for comfort as far as Sauron was concerned.
Right, and the audience can maybe not know whether it's going to be Bor or Alfang who's going to cause a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I think that gives us a really nice little subplot of season 7, which enables us to keep Sauron right on screen, like very much involved in the whole arc of season 7, and yet he doesn't appear in Beleriand even once. Like, as far as the people in Beleriand they have no idea. Because it's not even obvious that any of the elves would ever even find out. I mean, maybe somebody is still alive after the Nirnaeth who might suspect. But again, there's so much going on after the Nirnaeth. Who's even asking that question now? Maedhros, actually. Okay, Maedhros might ask the question. Maedhros might guess. He is the one person who might figure it out. But he doesn't even have to. Again, he also has other things to think about. So, yeah, I like it. This doesn't mean, by the way, that we have to totally ditch Taur Nufuan. I know that he goes to, in the book it says he goes to Taur Nufuan. He can do that. But that brings us back around to the Taur Nufuan / Dorthonian question, which we have not answered about Sauron, which is the question of, is Sauron involved in the hunting of Beren, and to what extent? Because I'm not 100%. It's hard. I'm of two minds about that. I talked about, I think I gave the two minds in which I was in last time, but we didn't resolve that at all. So next time we need to resolve that. We need to figure out Gorlim, but oh man, in order to figure out the Gorlim thing, we got to figure out the whole Wraith issue. We've got some metaphysics to wrestle with before we can really resolve the Dorthonian situation. Maybe we can duck that temporarily and just focus on the Sauron angle and not the Wraith of Gorlim appearing to Beren angle, and save that for later. But anyway, so Sauron's involvement in the Beren hunting and the things that happened at Dorthonion, and is that or is that not connected to why he returns to that same area after his wounding before he then hatch? Because my vision there is he can stay in Taur Nufuan there for a little while, and it's there that he kind of regroups and hatches his next plot, which is over the mountains, recruiting humans and starting Operation Easterling. So again, I don't want anybody to think that I'm just like giving Tower Nufuin a miss and going straight over, having Sauron going straight over the mountains. He can totally be there for a while. We don't have to be in a rush. Again, we're going to have like half a season or more between when he's, what's it going to be? Episode 4, 5 at most that Sauron is going to be defeated. I mean, there's a lot still to happen. We've got to do the whole building up of their relationship and of the stuff with Curufin and Celegorm, and then going to Angband, and then coming back from Angband, and then reconciling with Thingol, and then the hunt for the wolf, and then the trip to Mandos, and then after that, there's a lot still to happen after it. So, I'm not even sure that Sauron's, the destruction of Tol Sirion can be the midpoint of the season. I think it happens before. Did we decide last time? Didn't we say what might be the midpoint of the season? I have a vague memory that we did, but I don't remember what it was.
I thought it was the destruction of
Was it the destruction? It might be.
But we can figure out exactly where things fall as we get more of this sorted out. Because, there is a lot of opportunity for story elements that we have not usually had to deal with.
Yes, many elements that...
Usually it's like there's one big battle we have to fit in the season somewhere. And this one is like... So.
Right. No, there's a lot. If we think of those kind of like battle scene, kind of like that kind of like conflict bursts out, right? These big moments, right? We've got, we've got the conflict leading to the abdication of Finrod. That's even if we don't count the imprisonment of Luthien as one, right? So we, but anyway, by her father. Even before she's imprisoned again, goes from cell to cell. Anyway, and then we've got the Finrod and Sauron battle, and then we've got the defeat of Sauron, and then we've got Luthien and Morgoth, and then we've got and that's even not even to answer the question yet of whether we have Bulldog involved. But anyway, okay. So let's think about Sauron and Dorthonion for next time. And then speaking of next time, look at that. We had a slide that I forgot about. Oh, and by the way, there were a bunch of people on the boards who were worried about what's going to happen, like what's happening with Sauron after the War of Wrath, and what his interaction with, his repentance, which may or may not have been genuine after the War of Wrath and everything. I'm interested in a lot of those comments, but the main thing I would say is, dude, we have years before we get there, right? There is so much story. Sauron has a lot of arc still to go, years worth of arc between now and when that happens. So let's not be hasty. Let's not borrow trouble yet. We will see where that will fit into his overall plot arc, his full run plot arc, because it is an important moment in his full run plot arc. But it's not for a long time. So let's wait before we get too worried about that. So questions for next time. As I said, first, Sauron, Baron, Dorthonion, what's going on? Who's involved? Who's responsible for the hunt for Baron and the whole Islanel issue? Then also, I want to segue from this to thinking about more of the bad guys. Are we going to do the attack on Doriath? If so, by whom, when, why, and what happens? Is Bulldog there? And if not, and if so, why doesn't he die? And these are all the questions that I have there. And in case you're wondering, attack on Doriath, what are you even talking about? It's in the Lay of Lathian. In the Lay of Lathian, we are told, in this actually kind of weird parenthetical passage, we're told, meanwhile, elsewhere, there was an attack on Doriath, and it didn't work. But anyway, back to Baron and Luthien. It's a strange kind of a side moment in the poem, in the action of the poem. But anyway, and that's, by the way, where Bulldog, the character, comes from. Bulldog is invented in the Lay of Lathian, and his whole purpose of existing is to lead that attack into Doriath. We need to figure out, are we doing that? Is Bulldog involved? What happens? And we need to know how that fits with Sauron's story. I mean, if there is an attack on Doriath, what's the timing of it? How does it connect with what's going on with Sauron? Right? I mean, if Sauron is going to dominate the bad guy scene, the villain scene, in the first half of the season at least, we can't have an arbitrary, as I say, what does it show us about the state of the villains? Is this Gothmog? It sounds like Gothmog. Let's assault, right? That sounds like Gothmog, doesn't it? Anyway, I don't know, whatever. And then meanwhile, what's Glaurung up to? We haven't resolved the Glaurung situation. We need to get him out of Hellevorn. We need to get him. But what do? We have nothing to do with Glaurung until the Nirnaeth are Nudiad, right? Like as text-wise, right? Text-wise, he's invisible from the Dagor Bragalach until the Nirnaeth. So how do we explain his non-involvement in this whole situation? We need to, again, we don't necessarily need to show that a lot, but we need to figure it out. Okay, so that's where we're headed next. Resolving hopefully we can come to a place where we have a better sense of the overall flow of the bad guy stories, who's doing what, around, now that we have the central Sauron Thuringwethil plot more or less worked out. I think we can resolve the rest of it and then come back to think about some of the other issues and then get into the episode outlines and things. I'm really tempted to kind of, in the same way that we're doing with the bad guys, go back and talk about, Celegorm and Curufin and talk about Beren and Luthien and stuff. But I think we can actually save a lot of that for the episode discussions as we go through, and just settle ourselves in these early sessions in the preseason sessions for like answering big picture lingering questions that we really need to sort out before we can even know how to approach stuff. This bad guy plot line, these things really needed to be answered now. I think we couldn't have really moved forward without having any idea where we were headed here. But as far as the good guys go, we know where we're headed, right? We know better than we've ever known in film the outline of the plot, right? So that doesn't need to be fleshed out preseason in the same way that the bad guys' stories have needed to be fleshed out. So we'll finish okay. Let me not say something as blithely confident as we'll finish the bad guys next time, but we will make serious progress on the bad guys next time, and then see where we go from there. All right, sound good, folks? Any final thoughts or questions?
No, sounds good.
All right. Okay.
Good. We did good work tonight.
We did good work tonight. I like this. I think at the end of the day, it might have been kind of satisfying to have Luthien kill Thuringwethil, but the more I thought about that, the less I liked the idea of Luthien just killing folks. I don't think she does that, you know? I don't think she's into combat. I don't think she's certainly into slaying things. Does she ever do that? I don't think she ever does that, right?
No.
So yeah. Anyway, I think
also this is we need to resolve the personal, there was interesting character drama with Sauron and Thuringwethil that just doesn't exist with Luthien.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's got no beef with Thuringwethil, right? And it would have been very difficult to try to manufacture some. So I like this. Okay. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us. Our next session will be on January 27th. So 2 weeks, we're back on our regular schedule now. Should be, I think, for a little bit, moving forward. Maybe even most of the way through February. So we might be on schedule here for several times in a row, which feels unusual after the holidays. But anyway, so looking forward to further discussion next time. Thanks, as always, to my co-hosts and to everybody who is joining us. It was a robust discussion on the live chat here tonight. And I will say, as always, Thanks for listening, and Godspeed.